Welcome back to Potions and Processing with me, your host, Raven White. The last time I filmed an episode, it took me 3 times to film it. Apparently that seems to be the trending thing now because this is my 3rd time filming this one. And that's just because I keep fumbling my words and what it is that I want to say. So that's fun. This episode, I thought it would be fun to start delving into some of the culty things that I grew up in. And last episode, I talked a little bit about social services showing up at our house, the last time I remember them showing up there. And I talked a little bit about what our house kind of looked and felt like. So I thought, let's dive into some of the culty things that I remember experiencing, especially in my preteens and early teens. Now, I want to preface this by saying I'm going to be talking about a lot of religious things and a lot of religious items and symbols, and I want to remind you that this is a cult. It's not a healthy religion or faith. This was something blown way out of context, used to exploit a vulnerable group of people, and that being me and my siblings primarily. So if I say things that sound offensive or that might trigger you because that it involves your faith or things that you believe in, I want you to remember that is not targeted towards you or your God or what you believe in, because I'm sure that you would not partake in any of these things. All right. These are things that, again, were used to abuse and control people. So don't hold on to it. This is not for you. All right. This has nothing to do with you. It's okay. Originally growing up, we were pretty normal Christian type family. We'd go to church on like Easter. I remember having like pretty Easter Sunday dresses. I was pretty good at Sunday school. I knew answers. I knew the Bible answers. I was Bible smart. As I got older though, the Bible started to become more of a weapon rather than a comfort, especially as I became more mature and became less child and more woman. I will say one of the Baptist churches that we were in when I was younger at the time, they did a really crappy job of intervening on our behalf when there was clear signs of discord and dissonance happening in our home, because my parents were actually receiving some marriage counseling from the pastor. And I remember my brother and I were there, and we were in like the nursery, and I snuck out to actually listen in on the counseling that was happening between my mom and dad and the pastor, because I was nosy, but also because I was just concerned, because my parents were always really upset after the counseling sessions, because my mom would always be like, oh, he always takes your side and he never listens to me. My stepdad had a habit of not addressing my mother as like a human. He would not call her by her name. He would say things like you. He wouldn't call her by her name. He would just refer to her as like you or it or stuff like that. And she brought that up in therapy, and the pastor was always like, well, what are you doing to make it better? Like, the pastor always put it on my mom. Now, my mom was, if you've watched any of my last videos, you know that my mother was a terrible human being and is a terrible human being and contributed to a lot of instability in our home. But she also endured a lot of abuse that she did not deserve either. And I remember just being super confused, even at a young age, and hearing that, like, excuse me? Even like then, the church was incredibly unhelpful at making sure that the person causing the harm and causing the crisis in our home held accountable. He was not. So that was fun. The reason that I bring that counseling session up and any of that to begin with is that is incredibly common in churches, I have found since then. And again, if you're part of this, please remember, don't hold on to it. Just remember, this isn't for you unless you're being taken advantage of by the system, then maybe it is for you. Then maybe you're meant to hear this right now. But if you're being, if you're being hurt in your marriage, or you're not being listened to in your marriage, and you're getting church counseling and your pastor is saying that it's your fault, or that you're not doing enough for your husband, or that if your husband is doing things outside of your marriage and that it's your fault because you're not doing enough, then it's your pastor is wrong. After that session, when the pastor basically told my mom that that it was her fault that my stepfather was like so unhappy, and that it was her fault that he was like having these angry outbursts at home, I remember that it like ticked it up at home. It gave him like this right to act how he acted. And it was just, it left an impression. I was quite young. I had many siblings, and I only had one at that time. So I was quite young, and I remember that, and I never forgot it. It stuck with me. I'm not sure if that qualifies as culty behavior, but it certainly qualifies as really shitty ass behavior. And the church who let that happen, and the pastor who let that happen, boy, when you stand before your God someday, I really, really, really hope that he brings that up to you. I really hope. We stopped going to that church eventually. We church hopped a lot, and I think that it was because he was just collecting, my stepfather was just collecting dogmas at that point to just pool into whatever it was, whatever concoction it was that he was creating in his mind. And then we met the Mennonite people. When I was a preteen, I had a pen pal who lived in Minnesota, and they were part of this whole belief thing. They were not Mennonite, but they were part of this whole belief system. And I found it online. I don't know if I want to put all of the information out here right now because it feels very vulnerable to do that. My mom was pen pals with her mother, and I was pen pals with the daughter, okay? And we started writing back and forth, and we started to get to know them. And then they wore head coverings, they dressed like super modestly. They had all of these things that they did and didn't do. And then all of that started to like slowly leak into our lives because we were being indoctrinated. And my stepdad, who had really been, I think, looking for more ways to control us and isolate us from the world already, really latched on to this idea because religion and faith is a great way to control and manipulate vulnerable groups of people. He believed women were created to be nothing more than birthers, helpers, homemakers, and that men had the right to do whatever they wanted to do to women. And here was this whole sect of people who basically believed the same thing. And here was this man who was already particularly fond of beating his children. And here was a whole sect of people who had sermons about how good it was to beat your children. He was already someone who liked to be the figurehead, the voice of God, the one in control, the decision maker. And here was a whole sect of people who believed that the man was the head of the household, the decision maker, the voice of God, the one in control. He found for himself this whole religion, this whole group of people who completely backed up everything he thought about himself in every kind of weird, messed up way. Now, I'm not saying that everything that he did would have been approved by this group of people, but I will say that those sermons about all of the different ways to beat your child are still up and available online for you to listen to. All the ways about how women are just not as good or worthy as men are up there and available for you to listen to. And people who preach and put out this kind of content and who support and spread this kind of material, it gives power to people like my stepfather, who then take it one step further to do even more horrible and terrible things behind closed doors, or even in my case, in front of people, and still get away with it. There's a lot to be said for when people in positions of power do things and their followers just let it happen, because it gives permission to other people who feel that way, whether or not the people in power intend for it to be taken that way or not. So as my relationship with my pen pal grew, so did this indoctrination into our home. And so did this belief system of beating your children is okay, and doing what you have to do to keep the devil out of your home is okay. When I was like 12 or 13 is when I started wearing head coverings. In fact, I think it might have been a little bit sooner than that, because I think I started wearing them about the time when I was in 5th grade. So maybe 11 even then. I started wearing head coverings. So I'm going to list off all of the things that I can remember that I couldn't do, and the things that we slowly lost in our home over time that we weren't allowed to do or to have. So I started wearing a head covering, and it covered from the hair all the way back to my head. I had to braid my hair and put it in a bun. Nobody could see my hair. I had to have it like pulled back. Like I didn't have bangs or anything. I had it like pulled back. You couldn't see my hair. I was not allowed to cut my hair, not trim it, nothing, no cutting. So I didn't cut my hair for a really long time. My hair was so long, and I have really thick hair as well. It was incredibly hard to maintain. I have thick, curly hair. So it grew quite long. I was not allowed to cut my hair, couldn't color my hair. No jewelry, no clothes that were tight or that could show my figure. Nothing worldly, nothing too flashy. I sewed some of my own clothes, a lot of like hand-me-downs, things like that, but a lot of really baggy clothes, nothing that could show anything, nothing that was above my knees. And if I wore anything that was shorter, I had to wear like tights or stockings, couldn't show any bare skin, no makeup or anything like that. No music unless it was parent approved. No movies or unless it was parent approved. Absolutely no magic or like anything like Disney related unless it was parent approved. We didn't have TV or anything like that. Couldn't listen to the radio unless it was parent approved. Every book was parent approved. I think that's why I ended up reading like a lot of the classics, because that's pretty much what we just had in our house. I ended up reading the Left Behind series when I was a young teenager, like an early teenager. My siblings, if they were boys, they had to have like their head shorn. They had to wear jeans, t-shirts, nothing like worldly. I do have some pictures somewhere. Maybe someday I will feel brave enough to post them of myself, not anybody else. But maybe someday I'll feel brave enough to include them. But I do have some pictures of myself from like that era. We lived a very sheltered bubble, and I grew up in the 90s, so it's always weird to me looking back now when people talk about things from the 90s, and I don't know what anyone is talking about most of the time, because I wasn't allowed to have anything or participate in anything, and I was also homeschooled. I went to a Christian school for 4th and 5th grade, which I will talk about in a different episode, because that was an experience in and of itself. But I was also homeschooled, and I was I'll talk about that in another episode too, because that is also a whole other thing. But I was homeschooled. And so I was very, very sheltered and just kept away from the world. So I just was not part of anything. I did not have any real knowledge of pop culture or anything that was happening. And so when I did finally get out, I was like 19. I spent my 20s feeling like I was playing catch up with everybody else. I still feel like that at 34, playing catch up. My friends will talk about stuff. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about because I missed out on everything. When I turned like 13, when I hit puberty, I was being heavily groomed to become a wife. I was being taught about courtship, about how I was likely going to have my husband picked out for me, if I was even going to have a husband, because there was also talk about me just staying at home to continue to raise my siblings. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to be a writer. And I don't think that idea was even like really thought about or supported beyond like my own like dreamscape. But, if I was going to have a husband, he was going to be picked out for me. There would be talks between him and my stepfather, and I wouldn't really have a say in the matter. I was being taught how to be a good wife, to be quiet, how to be submissive, how to keep a home, how to can, how to food prep, how to make good meals, how to keep a home clean, how to raise children, how to sew clothes. Basically, being a very good traditional housewife, homesteading housewife, with a lot of focus on being able to produce lots of children. I was not raised to have any other aspiration besides that, or that I was good to have anything besides that. I was not made to do anything but that. In a more sinister tone, I was being groomed for my stepfather. And we can go into that more in a different video because this one was already getting too long. This was kind of what my puberty, what my teenage years kind of looked like as we got more and farther into this cult, this belief system of what I was going to be made for and what I couldn't do. No adornments, no cutting your hair, no showing your body, no acknowledgement of your own existence. I was not allowed to acknowledge my own existence, basically, is what it came down to. And limiting what I was allowed to interact with. Keep me dumb, keep me quiet, keep me small, keep me easy to control. That is really what it came down to. And keep me shamed and keep me under the thumb of an angry, jealous God that I would be too afraid to piss off. That's where I'm going to pause it for this episode because it's getting really long. I'm excited to explore this with you guys because it is something that I have a hard time talking about. It's hard to talk about something that was also incredibly close to my heart. My faith sustained me through all of that. And it's weird to talk about because my faith is not the same anymore. I do not believe in the things I believed in back then. I'm a completely different person than I was all those years ago. But I have this very special place in my heart for who I was then. Because even though we had all that stuff going on, I still had so much love. And I still had this belief that there had to be something better. And I read something once and it was, you believe what you believe during a season when you need it. And I believed what I believed during that time and it sustained me. And even though it wasn't the best, it got me through a lot of really terrible things. So I honor that spot in my heart anyway. I'm excited to kind of go through that and talk about it because I think that it's important to acknowledge that your faith and your belief systems can grow and change as you change as a person. It's also, it's just interesting for me to like look back on that, and I look a lot different than I do now. And self-expression is incredibly important to me now, and I think that is because I was so stifled back then through my whole childhood and through my whole teenage years, which is supposed to be about self-expression. I feel like your teenage years is when you kind of like play around a little bit and you kind of feel your aesthetics, and, you know, going into your 20s, kind of feel what your vibe is. And I never really experienced that at all. So even though I'm in my 30s, I still have purple hair now, and people kind of look at me funny sometimes, but I don't really care because I missed out on it. So I enjoy it now. Anyway, thanks for sitting with me for this episode. And take a deep breath. And remember, we may be different species, but we're all part of the same family. So please be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and I will see you next week.